Hello and welcome to Mr. Clark After Dark, everyone. My name is Lucas Clark and I am a certified educator with Alberta Education and the Alberta Teachers Association. All conversations and interactions exchanged is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. In no way does the content discussed intend to be in violation of the ATA Code of Conduct or meant to target any individual student, teacher, or to belittle or demean the profession in any way. If you have something that you would like me to discuss or have a story of your own to share, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com. You can also send a direct message to me on Instagram at Mr. Clark After Dark. Hope you enjoy the show, and please do not forget to subscribe. And now, on to the show. Hope you all enjoy. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I have on Scott Barr. He is currently the Director of Human Resources and Administration with the Fort McMurray Public School District and is currently in his 27th year in the profession. On part one of the episode, we discussed the pros and cons of teaching physical education and the stereotypes associated with it, how martial arts has helped Scott with his personal growth, the adjustment from teaching to administering, creating a positive school culture, the teaching shortage, why teachers are looking for any way out, advice for graduate school and what educational leadership teaches you, the challenges of implementing the new K-6 curriculum in Alberta, the importance of and how to build relationships, meditation, and much more. Thank you guys all for tuning in and hope you enjoy the show.
It was like a computer-driven teaching. So I was the facilitator, and I would do like a quick lesson, and then they would go do the practice on the computer, and I would mark it on the computer. This was back in early 2000, like 2001, 2002.
So what did you? So I have this rolling here now. But what did you teach before? Because I only know you as principal.
Yeah. So I did 4 years of teaching at Dickinsfield. I came up here to teach all 4 core to grade 7 and 8.
Okay. So you didn't have like a humanities or
well, I was a social studies major.
Okay, I did not know that. All right.
Yeah, that's my World Wars are my thing. So
okay.
So I came up to teach the 4 core because I couldn't get a job in 96. There was nothing. So when I finally got one in 96, I was 95. I graduated in 96.
So it took you a year of
I worked at Alberta Education actually, working and packing achievement tests and stuff to get them sent out, which was a great job for money. But then I came up in last week of September of 96.
So where were you before?
Sherwood Park, Edmonton.
Sherwood Park.
Yeah,
sorry, you're not from here?
No, I'm not from here. No, I grew up in Sherwood Park, so Edmonton.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then I came up and did all 4 core, which was ridiculous because I still to this day am one of the worst spellers. So those kids are probably now 40 and can't spell.
Oh, that's fine. You know what?
It's fine.
That's
fine.
Not,
there's lots of technology that'll do that for you now.
Yeah.
And then after about a month of that, their PhysEd teacher went on a leave at the school. And so they switched me to just math, science, and PhysEd.
And this is at Dickinsfield?
This is Dickinsfield.
Okay,
and then I spent 4 years teaching that there. Math, science, and PhysEd and computers. Yeah. And then moved to Westwood when their AD opened up. And I was AD/PhysEd/ I always kept math. I always wanted to keep a core subject. Always.
Why?
I think just the way some teachers look at PhysEd teachers. I don't personally feel that, but I know that is a myth out there. So it's something I always wanted to show that I was always still in the classroom. And so I did. I taught math up to grade 11. So
you always felt like you need to have a certain degree of, like, I still have skin in the game kind of thing.
I don't think you need it. I think there's people who believe you need it. I think there's people who believe you need it. I don't think you need it. No, I think some of the best
those people? Because like I have this conversation all the time of like there's this internal kind of pressure to kind of maintain. I don't know if image is the right word, but like a daily experience that's more similar to most people, so that you can kind of stay relevant. I guess maybe it's
trenches type thing. Yeah, I just think it's a matter of also wanting to continue to be, honing my, I don't want to sound too technical, but your pedagogy and getting and keep teaching and keep working at that and grinding away at that. I just enjoyed being in the classroom still and having that connection with students too. Yeah. So, and I still did that in gym. I mean, I very much taught skill-based gym and, let's compare you to you, no one else. And that's where your mark was based on. It wasn't based on a standard. I mean, the standard was you. How good can you do this skill and then get better at it?
Did you like teaching PhysEd?
Loved it. Loved it.
I never have formally taught it.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of a weird thing where I'm kind of in year 2, I guess, like 2.5.
Yeah.
But I subbed for 2 years before.
Right.
Because I remember we had that.
Yeah.
I subbed
Short term.
It was actually 2 years, mostly in the Catholic board,
Right.
almost every day.
Sure.
And I remember it was one of my last days here, subbing before I started. Anyway.
Yeah.
But most of my subbing was PhysEd.
Right.
Especially any sort of, you couldn't get formal long-term assignments, but they would kind of put you in each day for 5 days, especially during COVID, because people were out for 2 weeks.
Of course. Yeah.
I thought it's so boring. I don't know
so
what it was.
You definitely can have that for sure. I just was super active. Like I always played. Like whatever sport we're doing, I was in there playing. I was not a sit on the chair kind of guy. That's unfortunately rampant in our world.
Well, no,
that was not me. I got in there, and if we were doing basketball, play badminton. We're doing, I made up games, rugby ball. I mean, we made things up. So I just was always participating. When we did the skill stuff, then I'd be doing my marking, my formative and summative stuff during that time. But then once the games were going, I was a part of it.
And same, but I thought it was funny because when I first started subbing for the first 2 years there, I still felt this need, even if I was subbing for PhysEd and I knew it, I had to wear like a dress shirt. And I was still I need to kind of maintain whatever, which is nothing wrong with that. But then obviously when you're in dress shoes and everyone's playing basketball, you can't really partake as much. Lost that part,
you
slowly
I definitely changed. When I was teaching both subjects, I changed. I would teach PhysEd for whatever 2/3 of my day and then have my one math class at the end of the day. I would change before I went.
Yes. And even now, when we do cross country, for example, I don't wear my gym clothes. Like I still feel, especially in social, I find even maybe that's you have this image of like history professor or whatever. You kind of have that image in your mind for your attire. But I wanted to. So how long did you teach for before you went into admin? After?
6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah, I did 4 at McTavish and then, 4 at Dickinsfield and then 2 at Westwood.
Okay.
And then the VP.
For 2 years.
Yeah, the VP. Opened up at Thickwood, and so I went to Thickwood for almost a year and a half actually.
So you never VP at Westwood?
Just stay tuned. I still that's later in the career. Yes, yeah. So I did a year and a half at Thickwood, which I love. What a fantastic school! Knowing every family, knowing every kid, I loved everything about it. And a little bit less money at that school too, and it really good place for me to learn about that early. About having to budget and make things work within
smaller scale. Is that on
scale.
Purpose?
No, I don't think so. That's just where the opening was at the time. I think that's kind of the trajectory most people should go if they want to go into admin. Is you'd love to have a small school first. I think that's probably a good way to learn some of the skills you need to move along.
So how did you find? So I'm assuming social studies trained. So secondary high was kind of your, and so I've thought about this where maybe 5-10 years from now, if someone wants to go, and even myself, I would have never been in an elementary setting. How is that adjustment as you're kind of going to be the boss at an elementary school?
So remember, I did work in elementary though, right?
Because
Dickinsfield was K-8.
Okay.
So I did, and I taught kindergarten phys ed. So I mean, I did have some time there doing that. And then when I went to Thickwood, it was still K-8.
Okay.
So when I was VP there, I mostly worked with the junior highs, but of course I worked with all the kids then. I mean, I loved being around the little kids. I loved every bit of that. And people always ask me, which did you like better? I mean, honestly, I think my personality is more suited for junior high school. I definitely connected with those kids very well. But I loved every minute, and I still to this day love every minute I get to go to an ECDP class or kindergarten class and hang out with them and sit on the ground and play. And there's just something about a connection in it. They're so all in immediately. Right, they immediately go all in with you if you're there to be a part of their day. Yeah, for better or worse. I mean, my wife teaches ECDP, and I know her stories are intense, and she works harder than any teacher I know. Them and English 30 teachers, I think, are the two to highest on the scale.
100%.
Those that right at the bottom, right at the top. The marking and the content they do at high school, and then that every 30 seconds you need a new lesson plan. So, so I did get to work with. I think it is important. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it is very important if you're going to be an administrator to have worked with every grade. I think it makes you a better high school teacher to know what they're doing in grade 2.
100%. And
so it's a big process because that grade 2 teachers is a big part of them graduating as a grade 12 teacher.
And that was one thing I've recognized the importance of is I find there's maybe a societal perception that elementary is babysitting.
Yeah, definitely.
But when you actually the science of reading, I did that in a course in university, and how crucial like ECDP and kindergarten are, like the Matthew principle and all that stuff. Where it's insane. And it's like my wife's a kindergarten teacher as well. So I am
see it.
Very familiar with the stories and just the exhaustion every day. It's just, it takes it out of you. Like
it totally does. But you know what? So giving. Like, I mean, that's the thing about that age group kids. Like you're up on the pedestal. everything you say is law, and so it's definitely a lot of pressure with that too. But it's a and so I did the time at Thickwood for a year and a half, and then Jen Rushdie actually moved to Dickinsfield to be principal at the start of that year, and they were looking for a VP, and so we had been connected in the past in our time at Dickinsfield when she was a VP and I was a teacher there, and we thought it'd be great to go through that learning process together. So she was the principal, and so I applied for the VP there, having taught there for 4 years. So I went back there, and I ended up being the vice principal there for 4 years.
When you go from teacher to vice principal, how aggressive is that jump?
Well, so when I did it, I still taught half-time. So like when I went to Thickwood, I was half-time teaching, half-time VP, because small school, right? So I still taught math science to grade 7 and 8s there. So I still had a classroom component and still coached a ton. Like I was coaching, like I did at Westwood. I coached a ton at Westwood and Dickinsfield before that. And then, so that continued when I went into Thickwood. One of the pieces of advice I got from Paula Hansen, who was the first principal I worked with as an administrator, just the best principal I ever worked with, sadly passed away a few years ago.
So why were they the best principal?
She just got it. She got what was important. Like she's one of these administrators who would get on the like on a parent teacher interview night, she would get on the announcements and be, okay, it's time for you to go home, everyone. Like our teachers need their rest. And she was very big on making sure people took care of themselves well before that was a shtick. So just really that drove that home, and the importance of family is a bit of a theme in my career, as you may have run into here at the school when you came on board here, that I kept going as well. And the importance of being an empathetic listener. She was just all those things, and she just really cared about.
What do you mean by an empathetic listener?
Somebody who really, how to lean in and make that person be the moment. You're in the moment, like you're living in that moment, and it fits with my belief system as well. There is nothing else going on except for this conversation with you and I. Could I sit here and think about, well, my kids are driving home on the highway right now? But that doesn't change anything on that, right? What is important is that you and I are sharing thoughts, and we're hopefully going to make each other a little bit better after hearing this, right?
And so is that something you've like developed and honed, or was that kind of always like?
I think, well, I would say in today's world, I would be on the spectrum of ADHD for sure, without question. I'm pretty active at all times, and I need to be moving, and I think that was my way of,
as I'm moving back and forth.
Yes, I'm jiggling my leg too, conscious of the fact that it'll get picked up on the mic. I think I learned how to deal with that through martial arts. I mean, I've been in karate since I was 13, and so that's been a big part of who I was, and that helped me develop that focus and the ways that work for me. And I actually hated school with a passion. I did not like school at all. And
because it's the same.
I just didn't fit. I wasn't that style of learner, and to sit down and write words out 50 times so you memorize how to spell it, and that just wasn't for me, and I knew that wasn't for me, and I made it through, and I did fine in school. It wasn't that I did bad, and I mean, I had a few run-ins in high school with getting sent home a few times, but I mean, overall, I just didn't fit in the way that the world worked, and so that's why my mantra as a teacher was always be the teacher you wish, be the teacher you needed. That's what kept me going. As I always wanted to be the teacher that every kid needed. And you can't always be, that's impossible. No. But I think you could be an empathetic listener, which circles us back to that, which then kids buy into.
And I feel like that's something valuable to learn early, that sometimes you're not the teacher for that kid.
No.
But sometimes it's okay. Like they talk about so-and-so teachers that, what? Great. That's their kid. You know what I mean? You can kind of, you don't need to try to kind of be the savior, I guess.
And I think so. Yeah, she taught me all of that at that first go at being an administrator, and how to try to balance that life too. I don't know if I always met that part of it. I think it's pretty tough as an administrator to do that. But then I went to Dickinsfield, which then was 600 students. I mean, then you're tripling your size of your school by the time I went there. So a lot more. Then I would move into, this is very common for a vice principal, at least back in those days. I don't know if it is now, but you teach whatever's left over and doesn't work on everybody else's schedule. So that's where I taught anything from kindergarten phys ed.
The dog's breakfast?
Dog's breakfast, yeah, for sure. I either taught, whatever. I did reading to grade 4 or 5s. I did, like I said, kindergarten phys ed. I did other grades phys ed. Lots of English reading, because the French teachers couldn't teach their English reading, because we don't want them speaking English to their kids, right? So I had a lot of time working with immersion students and that programming, and which I love, and both my kids went through it. So till junior high and high school. So so I did that for 4 years, and then I moved to Westwood as vice principal, which where I would run into your
Yeah.
your brother, and had a great time there. I loved everything about it. I loved being there again, and still doing some coaching between golf and stuff like that, and running the floor hockey, the dub.
Yeah, I find floor hockey kind of died out once I got to high school, which it sucked. It was sad.
That was a lot of fun. We had some great times that time.
Yeah, and I find
the Verghese Cup, and then between the Bowie Bowl.
Yeah, man, the Verghese Cup. I always remember because there's teachers here who obviously I played at Westwood still. There's some I played against, but it was the day before Christmas break. In the afternoon.
Yeah, it was
so fun.
Yes, it was a great time.
I loved it, and honestly, that's probably for a big part was the inspiration for the Grad Cup thing.
Yeah,
and that was how do you kind of channel that
same idea?
Because again, I'll never forget. Playing in those games,
seeing
Henneberry score from
half court. Isn't that our job? Isn't that our job though? To make a memory for a kid. Kids are not going to remember you teaching them the Western Front and the World Wars. You hope they do, but they're sure as hell not gonna. Yeah. They're gonna remember if you make a moment for them, and they'll remember how you made them feel. Yeah. Those two things combined. I taught some great math lessons. I don't think there's any kid out there who remembers me as a math teacher. Yeah. Maybe they remember me for many other things, but that is not what they remember me as. So
and so a part like that kind of memory making teacher that you needed to be. Like, what are some things that if you had teachers growing up that you made sure that you didn't do, or things that you did differently?
I tried not to put kids into a box. That was a big thing I didn't like. I didn't like the whole this is a bad kid, or this is a kid that does that, or this is a kid that does that. I tried not to buy too much into that. I wanted that kid to tell me what they wanted. That was really more one of the big things I did, especially as I became a vice principal at the high school, where you become a bit more of the police officer type style. Like you're doing a lot of investigations and shakedowns and stuff like that.
How's that adjustment for you?
Every step you took away from the classroom takes a little bit of an adjustment, right? I mean, when you're halftime VP, you're still teaching, so you still feel that direct connection with a homeroom class. And then when you go full-time VP, you're that one more step away. I always equated it to that. My goal was to always have that same impact, but on a bigger scale in the school. Okay. So when you're a homeroom teacher, you have a massive impact on that group you're seeing every day, all day. So then you're VP, you're now seeing more kids. And then when you're full-time VP, you're seeing the entire school. So you're trying to now have that impact that one step further. Same when you go to principal, when you get in the big chair, you're wanting to have an impact on the culture of a whole school. So I mean, after 4 years at Westwood, McTavish was coming down the pipe, and it was definitely a goal of mine. That was where I thought I would have a good fit for my skill set. And the interview process was pretty daunting, and I enjoyed it.
So what was that process like? Because I think for a new school and culture,
it was a big first new school in 26 years in the city for the public schools.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I guess Trinity was before, or was it the same
Trinity,
year?
We opened the same year as Trinity.
Right.
So, but this is public schools, right?
Exactly.
They had several K-8s.
I was obviously the first senior class of McTavish.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that interview process like, and how do you go into a brand new school? Like, was it almost scarier to have a new school, or even better to have a new school with new teachers and like a new culture to create?
Well, I've only had that example, right? So one of the things I was really glad I did right from the get-go, because I did meet with every single teacher the year before they came here. So as the building was every grade 7-8 teacher knew they were coming here. This was not this was not a pick staff. People were moving here. Their kids were moving here. Like, so the schools were changing to K to 6, 7 to 9. So I mean, I wasn't staffing. This was who you're getting. So I wanted them to feel a part of it. So I went around and met with every teacher at their school in the second half of that year, and just asked them, like, what do you feel like you bring to the table? What do you feel is missing in a school? What do you want it to be?
What were some answers? Were there like consistencies there that you kind of took as like nuggets?
I think making them feel like home. That was a big one. Kids need to feel like home, because the grade 7s and 8s in the K to 6 or K to 8 world didn't feel like they belonged. And then the 9s were a little adrift. They were like the low person out of the 4 years in the school, and you never really fit there either, because you're not even doing credits. So this was a chance for the 9s to be leaders and the 7s to have a place to be home. And then the grade 8s are always the middle child. They always will be, and they're never going to be quite settled. But I think that was consistency, was make them feel like they're at home, and that this is a unique opportunity they have to make something special.
Because grade 9 was my favorite year.
Yeah.
When I think back to, because I only had 1 year here, and I remember it was nice kind of reflecting that you had grade 8, you had the last grade 8 farewell.
You did, yeah.
And then you had a new school where you were still
You
was
continue
kind of
2 years of being the top.
yeah, well, but
Yeah.
which maybe was
Yeah.
not the best thing either, but it was a good stepping stone.
Yes, for sure.
Especially where you knew everyone was going to pretty much go to Westwood after.
Yep.
That was nice because
Yeah.
you kind of knew everyone was taking the same path.
Yes.
It's obviously not a high school then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess what I was kind of saying was you've been an administrator at these other schools where there's a lot of long-standing relationships. There's cliques. Which is in any organization.
And if you think about it, Dickinsfield, I went back there as vice principal 3 years after I was a teacher, and
how did you
8 years after being a first-year teacher. And most of those teachers were still there. I think you just got to do the work.
Yeah. So what do you mean by the work?
You got to go in there and do a good job. Like, you be there for them. You be there for kids, and people respect that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about a time thing. I'm not talking about putting in. Yeah. I mean, I did put lots of hours, and that was very much a trait of mine. But you just got to be there for them when they need it, and really respect the work that they're doing. And that's, you let that speak for itself. I didn't try anything different. I was just who I was. I've always been who I am. That I never changed. I don't put a show on for anyone. It's just too hard to keep up with if you have different faces for different people. So I am who I am, whether or not you're a kid who I'm suspending, or if you're a teacher I'm working with to get better at their job, or one that's celebrating something. I am who I am. It's just that was one thing I definitely wanted to portray as well. Like, I remember being in the classroom and that was the way it was, and stuff like that. So I don't think I would recommend being the principal of a big school as your very first principal job. I don't think that was the easiest thing in the world, but it is extremely rewarding to know that you were a part of helping create a culture at a school that did not exist. Like, it did not exist. There was no culture.
Because I will say, again, and not trying to talk anything poorly about any of the other schools here, but I found McTavish was the most welcoming.
Yeah, and that was the goal. Yeah, definitely a big goal of mine.
Yeah, and then I found the staff super friendly. Now, I don't know if this was because, like, it was nice that I pretty much had never subbed at McTavish, only a couple times before I did my practicums. And that's a weird experience that you can actually have the chance to sub at a school
you went to
prior to.
I like the dark. It's like my brain.
Well, honestly, do you want to keep them up?
No, I don't care. I'm kidding. I don't care. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. So I was going to talk back to when you started in 96, you said? You said it was pretty much impossible to find a gig.
Wow. I sent out 63 letters in 95 when I graduated to every single jurisdiction in the province and got postcards back. They were sending postcard rejections at that time. Because 95 was the year they rolled back salaries. 94? 94, 95. Yeah, they rolled back salaries. Klein years. Come on. History. Social yeah. So 94 was rollback of salaries. And so there was less teachers spots to be had. And so there was nothing. And I even got one from Fort McMurray Public Schools. I wish I had kept it. That'd have been the best thing in the world to have on my wall. I'd have kept it for sure. It's just proof that you just got to keep going. You just keep grinding and you're going to find something. So when they did, and then when they offered it, I said sure. And my wife was finishing her second degree at U of A, and she was getting her ed degree. And so we got married in August, and I was living up here in end of September.
Okay. And so, but that's kind of one of the key differences is that when I was
massive difference now.
Yeah. When I was in high school still, it was don't be a teacher only because you'll never find a job. Yeah. And now all I'm hearing is it's major teacher shortage
everywhere.
Yeah. And it's 1 in 50% of teachers leave in first 5 years.
It's tough times right now.
And then it's like most, if not all teachers would pretty much take any other job, even with like a 20% pay cut, which is that is tough. Unfathomable to me.
And I can't even imagine that because this is my passion. I don't know what else I would do. I don't know what I do.
Well, I've said the exact same thing where obviously I'm still new. I still have like the golden retriever energy, I guess. But I just don't. Well, one, I don't really know what I would never even think. I wouldn't even know what I would do other than this. But two, why do you think that is? From your experience, why has that happened?
Why has that switch has occurred?
Yeah, I
think the pressures on a teacher are tenfold what they were in 96.
So what do you mean by that?
Just I think the social media presence, the ability for a parent to find things out immediately, and the desire for them to find out immediately from Power School, take a look at their mark every day. I think there's just a shift in how much the eyes can be on you. And I'm not saying that there weren't eyes on you then either. Of course there was, and there should always be. Yeah. But I think that the pressure that people are taking, they internalize it more now. And I think that's just because it's just constant. You used to be able to go home at the end of the day and, you might have your mark book with you, but you didn't have anyone, a parent looking over your shoulder looking at it, but you do now.
Like as soon as you hit enter, you
could get an email.
It's live. You can get an email right away. Yeah.
Right away. So, I mean, that's a lot. There's not many jobs that are like that. There just isn't. It's a different place. And, I think like you talked about the passion, I don't know any teacher that starts into this business without it. I don't know why you would. Yeah. I just think that sometimes you get here and it's maybe not the reality you thought it was. And why that is, I think it's different for every person. I think everyone, either has an experience where they didn't maybe get this timetable they wanted, or they had classes too big. And it makes it easy to find ways to point the finger and say, there's this problem or that problem, as opposed to saying, how can I make this the best for what I have? And I think sometimes having a bigger picture view really helps too. And like you said, where I meandered around between 4 schools that had very different clientele, very different budgets, it helped me realize that a bit better too.
So what do you mean by a big picture view?
Well, I think
what was your big picture view?
I think my big picture view is that I need to help these kids be better people in the end, more than anything else. And yes, you have to teach curriculum, and yes, it's important. I really remember actually after the fire, I was in a documentary about the school that day, and I remember talking to the guy about that and saying, we have to cover the curriculum, and we must do that for good reasons. But in the end, it's the memories that I'll harken back to that. It's the memories we connect with those kids that is really what they're going to remember school about.
I didn't even think about asking about evacuation, but what was that day like for you?
Yeah, that was a day. Like I could talk about that forever. That's, dismissing 680 kids to their families in the middle of a day was something else. And, we stood at that door and the parents lined up, and we had our shelter in place, and the kids couldn't leave till their parents came, and we handed them off. And, I'm standing at the front door here at McTavish, and people are saying to me, Scott, the fire's like coming up the hill towards your house. I'm like, well, so it is. Like, what was I getting? Like,
yeah,
what meant nothing. You have like, no, this was my job.
What is that moment like for you? Like
nothing. I was just in the moment. I didn't even think anything of it. No, like I had also known that my wife had gotten to our house and had something.
Okay.
Had got something. I don't know what, but at the point she had something.
Hopefully something important.
Cheese slices and no, I'm kidding. No, so yeah, I stood here, out front of the school, and once the Carmageddon was happening outside, and we got those kids out. By about 4:00, there was about 30 students still left because parents couldn't get there.
Yeah, and then I left around 5. Yeah.
What's that?
I left around 5 p.m. 5
so yeah, because you were in grade 9 that year, right?
No,
you were in high school.
I was upgrading at Westwood.
Okay, right, great. Yeah. So most of those kids got picked up by about 5:30. Yeah. And then there was a smattering of like myself, James Hayward, a few other teachers, and a few families had come to be at the school. Krista Butts was there and her kids, and my kids went to McTavish during that time, so they were with me the whole time. My wife made it to the school around 5:30, so it took her 2 hours from the top of Real Martin Drive, where golf course is, to here. Yeah. With the firewall coming at her and the temperature like 50 degrees in the car. Yeah. So she made it. And then so we eventually petered it down to about 4 kids. And now it's 10 o'clock at night. Oh, I was still here. So these kids are mine at this point now, right? So we're still here, and we've had dinner. We cracked into the foods room, made dinner, because we knew the stuff's going to go bad.
So what do you mean by yours? Because I know with being a principal, there's a lot more liability.
That's my kid in my mind. Those parents drop their kids off at school. Those are my children now. Yeah, and they are legally, anyways, in parental loci, right?
So what did you do?
So they stayed with us, and we've been back and forth with the police till around 10:15, and then because their parents were north already, they weren't letting anybody back in town. Okay, so we had to get some of them to them, and one girl. Her mom had gone to Edmonton for day surgery, and weren't allowed back into town. And her and her husband went, like the dad, and that girl was on her own. Like she literally was on her own. Like there was no you never assume that's going to happen.
No, it's like we'll literally be home.
We'll be right back. You'll be at school, and I'll be home when you're home. So 3 of them at 11:15, I took them to the bus at Independent. Okay. There was a VAC bus that was going out to the sites to their parents. And I dropped the 3 of them off in my car, the beauty Black Pearl, and came back here. And as soon as I left there, the police followed me, lights and sirens, because they didn't know why I didn't get on the shuttle bus. Well, there was a 0 chance I was getting on that bus. My family was at school. So I peeled it. They were lights and sirens, chased me through Trinity parking lot. No, I wasn't slowing down. I did not. I was not stopping. No way I was stopping. There's no way. And so then I go back to the school and parked, and they skidded in behind me, came out. They've got like the masks on and stuff, right? Because remember, smoke was everywhere.
Yes, yeah.
And, you know, the one police officer was like, you know, some choice words about what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I said, there's like 30 people still in the school. We're not going anywhere. Now, I will say this. We did have somebody who was connected to the fire department. So we did have a direct line as to where it was safest to be.
Yeah.
And so the one police officer who I never saw again after that day looked me in the eyes and said, there's no hope. You all need to get out of here. And I it was my response. So there's my response in front of the school at 11:30 at night. I just started laughing, and his partner just covered her face with her hand, and he's just like, "There's no hope." I mean, they've got they've got guns, so I mean, I'm going to listen to them.
You know what, man? You make some good points.
So we've taken mats from the gym and are laying them in the conference room in the office for the kids to sleep, because there's some little kids there. My kids were in grade 7 and 9, so like, there was a handful of kids that age there getting ready to bunk down for the night, and this cop runs into the room and says to them, "There's no hope. There's no hope. Get your stuff and get out." And so we had to leave 11:30 at night. So remember, I'm down to how many students left? One student leaves with me and my family. So there was my wife and my 2 kids in her car, myself, teacher from the school, and one student. Yeah, and her 2 dogs and her cat. And we left the school at 11:30 at night that night. After that whole day of adrenaline releasing and stuff like that, and and Rockway and myself were in one car, and this girl Emma, and we drove out of town, and Jen and the kids were in the other, and we got to the bottom of the hill, and we had to either go left to the plants, or right to Edmonton, and we chose right.
Yeah, right to Edmonton.
We went, and it was like the house. The hill was on fire when we left. It looked like lava to me. I'll never forget that.
That's crazy.
And it did look like Carmageddon. Like there's buses across the divided highway, like just parked in the middle, and it took us till 2 a.m. to get past, or 1:30 to get to Anzac turn, which is where Emma's parents had made it to. So we stopped at the side of the road there at 1:30 in the morning, walked across the middle of the highway, and there they were. And I'll never forget that moment.
That is insane.
Their kid to their mom. Yeah.
Wow.
That was a moment. Yeah, you don't forget that look on a mom's face. And being a parent, I can imagine what that felt like.
Well, it's because you obviously risked like staying here for all those hours for that parent, right? Like, like obviously it was no brainer, but that is a.
Yeah, then we continued on. Then we drove on.
Yeah.
And then we stopped at Marion Lakes because they were giving away some free gas at one of those camps. That night, and we filled up, and we made it. We slept there till about 5:30. I think we got there about 4 a.m, and then we stayed in the cars having. I just needed to sleep. I was crashing. Of course. So, and then 5:30 we got up and started rolling again, and stopped in Grasslands in their school. They opened up their school for us that day, and we went in for some snacks and wash up, and then made it to Sherwood Park to Jen's parents' place at about 12:30 the next day. So that drive took us 13 hours.
I was gonna say mine was literally 13 hours as well. Because I remember
Wednesday. We call it Wednesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday.
Because I remember it took. It almost seemed as soon as we passed the first people that were there handing out water bottles and stuff on the highway. I just like not actually crashed, but I just like my body shut down after all those hours of. And so my brother Josh told me, I was like, "You got to drive for an hour." I was like, "I need to," because he was kind of like going through the motions as well, as anyone would.
Everybody was, and we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, and so it was wild, but I didn't even think about asking you about that for.
Yeah, it was something else to be a part of, and I've actually talked at a few symposiums on leadership and stuff like that about that day, about leading in Toronto, in the moment.
Literally leading into the fire.
Literally, yeah. So it's definitely, it was an experience for sure. But once again, it's the same principles occurred. Like it's the same empathetic listening and being there for kids and being who they needed, and it just was something totally different than what you need. And you know what? Nothing I did was special. I could list you 5 to 10 other administrators, public Catholic schools, separate, that did the same sort of stuff up here. I mean, I'm not unique in that. I don't think.
Well, and I almost find it's, if you're the kind of person to like go into the ed and you're passionate, that seems to be something most people would do in that scenario, right? But no, but still, and
other people made different decisions that day, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I don't judge anybody for whatever decisions they made that day, because we don't get that's not in a handbook. No. And that's the thing. Like, my children were in this school. It made my decisions easier.
Yeah. Did you do a master's in leadership?
Yeah.
Is that so? Because I know now you're in the district director role, right?
Yep, director of HR
and so what did the Masters of Leadership degree offer you?
Do you know what? That's the first time I liked school. First time ever. I enjoyed schooling because I got to drive what I was learning about. I got to do the things that I was passionate about. So the courses were much more directed at how to be an empathetic leader, how to be a good leader, how to be what the school needed. Now, of course, you have to do the research ones and stuff like that everyone has to do. And you get through those ones. But the majority of the ones, I just really loved being able to share. We were in a cohort of 24 people up here. There was 12 from the public board,
here, then.
12 from the Catholic board, 10 from the public, and 4 from the Cano. So it was UPEI did it up here. And so we met. Yeah. So we they would fly the teachers to us.
What?
I know, unbelievable.
That is
quite a shtick.
That's so random.
They did 2 rounds of it, and then they never did it again because UA stepped in and said,
it was
enough of that.
I mean,
They flew up here. So we would have 1 4-day weekend of a class, and then we'd have about a month and a half, not off, but no classes, so online stuff. But then they'd come back for 4 more days to finish up that course, and in between the time you do your papers and all that kind of stuff. I think it just got you. It makes you a better writer, number one. I think that's super important when you move up the food chain. You
just
need
a
to be able to write it.
in general.
You have to be a better communicator, especially in the written world, because so much more of our stuff is written down.
Yeah.
And then, I enjoyed that. And I do think it did help. I do think it's a must for administrators in our division. You have to have it.
Yeah. And so I've heard some people say it's not, and I could be wrong, where it's not just a master's in leadership, but you can do like an interdisciplinary, or you can I know there's, for example, so social studies focus. There's the possibility to do a master's in secondary social studies, where you're actually focusing on the discipline. So the requirement,
and I would check mark the box like you've got a master's. That's what we're asking for. I mean, do I think that maybe a leadership one or more education driven one would probably be a better fit? Probably, but it's not a must. Yeah.
So I guess that was my question: is let's just say if someone in my position pursued a social studies route, what are they not getting?
My guess is you're probably not getting a little bit more of the theory behind leading a school, like that portion of it too. Like,
so what did you find like stuck out to you the most from that process?
I think that's the culture piece of it that I really don't think I really understood deeply enough until I really started doing some research into the people who write about that, about coherence and the structure of a school and how to move things along during PLFs and that kind of stuff is stuff you need to learn. That's not just ingrained in us. That is something you learn.
So what does like an unhealthy school culture look like to you?
I think when you walk into it. The second you walk into a door,
you feel it.
Right? Just like you feel it the other way too. I mean, it's maybe more too institutional probably, and more focused on goal, on data, not data driven goals, because that's what we all should be focused on, but it's more like focused on numbers and not people, and not, I think you can do both. I'm definitely a big fan of that's something else you learn in your master's, that you can do both.
So how do you do both?
Well, I think you just need to always remember there's a human attached to the data. That's the big way to do it, is always to remember that, right?
Well, a big thing is obviously now I'm teaching some, like not all, but most of the diploma social courses here.
It's pressure.
And so it's pressure, but it's also, to look at just the diploma average, I find is almost maybe misleading, because we've been pretty much on par with the province for the last couple of years. And, but I'm always, how did each student do? And I looked more deeply into was I actually
That's a good way to do
assessing them properly? Did they do better? Did they do worse? And now
you can compare that then to how you differentiated for your classes too. And then if you see a kid struggled on something, you thought you were differentiating for them. The next time you do it, perhaps you shift your differentiation. So I think that's what you can do with that data, that still keeps in mind that the kids in front of you every time are different. Don't get me started about high stakes testing, and I'm not a fan of that. I did not do well with them, and I just think there's a better ways to find out what a child knows by the time when they're 18 than 160 multiple choice questions or written. Like, that's to me asinine to think that this is the only way kids can produce. And it's interesting too that we spend in a semester there's 125 hours of learning, right? That's how long a course is, but we're going to now in 6 hours tell me if you know 125 hours. How does don't get me started. I mean, Alberta is my friend though.
Well, I want. Well, not that I want to. I don't even know where I would want to go down this rabbit hole. But one of the things you always hear is people go into education, they say there's problems with the system. You know what I mean? Like it's just common rhetoric, and and now. But my question is, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by that?
So, what would you change? What would you change if you had the magic wand?
Well, yeah, and exactly. And so I find now that you are kind of in a district role, like, was there anything that you kind of intended to change, that maybe there was like barriers you didn't expect, or what is kind of the goal as a director now for that you're trying to, like, now where do we take this?
I think forward? The big thing now is when you're in a division office position, you have to work with the government. You have to. I mean, it doesn't matter what government or who is in power, like them, dislike them, it doesn't matter. You still are working with them and you're working for them. So we need to make that it's a weird relationship. It is, like, at times. It certainly can be. But you have to remember that you're still representing the schools. So it's finding that happy medium to, just like the administrator is the buffer between the teacher and the parent, in my mind, we too are that now. We do our best to buffer that. The admin and the government kind of thing? So we take care of a lot of stuff that hopefully doesn't trickle down to the next level, that then trickles down to, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, I always thought about how I could help, what am I doing is helping kids. But now that I'm working in HR, I'm trying to hire the best people I can. And so that would be the best people in the classes for the kids. So it's still connected to what was my goal. Right. So what's some of the biggest challenges or maybe surprises in being in that role, working with the government? Like, what does an average day of being a district director kind of look like in terms of the dealings? I've done HR and education, so I've done both those roles down there. So I did education for about 6 months, and then now I've been in HR for a year and a half. The education one, you definitely deal with the department more, because you're talking about curriculum, and so there's a lot more back and forth with them in that role. So what, if you can share, like, what are kind of those conversations about? Like, what are they? They're going to let you know what they're putting out, and then you're going to figure out how best to implement it. So for example, like when I was in that education role, we had the new curriculum coming up for K-3. So that was a big shocker to people's systems, and it wasn't, as you recall, welcomed too well, especially the social studies curriculum. And so I find there's a lot of there's like resistance to any form of curricular change, like in general, but then there's also we need to refresh the curriculum. So what was not? I think the basis of all that is the polarization of the world right now. Without a question, and that's why I try. There's good in all, and there's bad in all, and let's just So what we had to do was work. We wanted to hear the voice of the teacher so that I could hear that. I needed to hear from them what is it that's worrying you, like, and so we had some hot stove meetings, and we gave them, here's all the new curriculum next to the old curriculum, so they would visually see the differences. Which ones are you most worried about? So then they highlighted the ones they're most worried about, and we made PD for them in May June for that those top hot button topics, so that they felt like going into their summer where they need to recharge. It's a must for teachers. Anyone who doesn't understand that never worked in a school. They could actually, shift down and not worry all summer about this new curriculum. They knew that they had some time in May and June, not enough by any means, but some time to at least sit with their colleagues and talk about what their worries were. So, I mean, that's an example. So you're working with the government saying, hey, you're doing this. So then you're saying, well, how can I make it work best for these people? So that's an example there. Now in HR, it's more about staffing the schools and getting as many people in front of those kids as you can. And I have a large focus on the QP staff, which is our amazing EAs and stuff like that. Is that work that they do? So I'm filling those roles. And then the needs of our students are driving that. So really trying to fill the role so there's always somebody helping those kids, especially those kids that need the most support. And then trying to fill our classrooms with teachers as well. Yeah, because you do recruiting. Oh yeah. Right? Yeah. And so I feel like I don't know where to get deeper into this teacher shortage. And I don't know if maybe I guess my question is, there's a general teacher shortage anyway. So it's one thing so how much of a shortage is there? And like, are we at a crisis point? Like, I'd say we are. And I'm going to give you this example as to why. So last year there was a high school in Airdrie that had a posted counseling position. And it's a big school. Like several thousand students. They could only get one person to fill that job. One teacher applied for it. So if Airdrie is having that problem, what are we having up here? So while we certainly are filling our positions and stuff like that, we're at the point where we're still okay. And of course, it's always hard to get a welding teacher or like this really specific stuff. It's really tough. But we're still doing okay on filling our regular classrooms. But when we go to our HR seminars, or we're at, CAS and stuff like that, where there's the whole provinces together. Everyone's having the same problem. We hear people from Ontario, Quebec, they're having the same problems. So this is going across the country now. It did used to be harder to get people up north. Of course it did. It always was, which is why we end up making more money up here. So that's the draw, and there's Northern Allowance. But anyone who's been to Calgary, the cost of living in Calgary is pretty equivalent up here now. So, it's that's not the toss up anymore. So I think we're at a tipping point. We really are. And
well, I guess that's because I had a conversation the other day where it kind of used to be, there's always the they, like the generalization of the people like behind the whatever making the decisions. But it's not the case from my perception so far that it's a moving from public to private education. It's like teachers don't want to teach in either of them.
No.
Like it's so like what happens when it tips over?
That's a big question.
You know what I mean? So like, what does that look like? How do you?
That's a big hanging chad.
Yeah.
All of our stuff right now. We don't know. Because we've never gotten there as a society, right? I just think some of the vitriol that's pointed at teachers now is so out there and so intense that people are questioning whether or not they want to take that on. And then
a lot of accusatory.
Totally, from a standpoint of no knowledge about really what's going on either. Yeah. Like it's just easier to make that assumption type thing. Right?
Well, and I remember there was this one thing from university where it was like everyone has an institutional biography where they went to school. Yeah. Because one of the only careers you ever actually see on a daily basis is a teacher. Yeah. So like, oh, that's easy. I could do that. So there's always this assumption that
I could do it better.
Yeah. Like, they just, like everything,
it's in a book. They're just reading what's in the book to them. Yeah, and therefore missing the whole part that I talked about at the very start of this, the connections and making moments, and that's not in a textbook anymore. That's the skill of the person teaching those kids that's making that happen. Do you wrap your teaching into that? You sure as hell do, but that's the skill of the teacher at work there. And that's what I've seen so much of in my career. There's been tons at this school. That's the one thing. I get to go around to every school now because I also evaluate first year teachers now, right? Okay. It's part of my role. Well, Mary Ray and I do. Yeah. So we share that. We share that, right? So we split the group in two. So I'll be visiting 28 classrooms this year to help those teachers become better at what they do. And we're a part of the puzzle. I mean, the principal and administrator and vice principals are the lead on that evaluation, but we come in as a second piece of it, right?
So what do you look for in terms of what are some commonalities amongst first year teachers that are the mistakes? Obviously, you're treading water. Like you're trying to use your resources that are given to you and figure out a way to kind of personalize them. But like, what do you notice in your evaluations? Like, what do you look for positives, and what are some of the negatives?
I'm going to clarify. I don't think there's any mistakes in your first year.
No, and I guess
I think that's learning. They're
totally
all just learning, and there would be nowhere to get better. I'm glad I'm not judged on my.
No, but what kind of adjustments do you like usually?
I think that balance between because I'm a big relationship guy. I was always about relationships and developing relationships, but there's that balance as a younger teacher figuring out where's the line and where do I want to keep that, and it's not easy. And so I think that's a piece of it. Classroom management, but learning that classroom management, really great classroom management just becomes a non-issue when you have a good lesson. There's no classroom management issues when you have a good lesson. And so but a good lesson means a lot. I mean, Hattie's work on the research that Hattie's done, if you've ever done it, looked at any of that, I really encourage you to look at it. Anyone who's listening to look into that stuff. Impact on student learning. And he has a meta-analysis on what really does impact student learning. And it's interesting stuff. And so that kind of the information I share with teachers, like, these three things you're doing great. And here's how much kind of impact they really does have on kids. These two are great. The other one you're spending so much time on doesn't. So why not try something different? And like, here's 3 other things you can try. But to me, it gets back to that relationship piece. And really being able to be present in the room. Like you need to be, like I need to see some of the stuff that's happening that you're getting those kids bought in, right? So we always give them a month or so. So we'll be starting that in the next couple of weeks, popping into classes, and so hopefully they've got their relationship and procedures established.
So do you guys ever do the surprise evaluation?
We don't, because we're coming from a district office, and number one, our schedules are so insane, it would be near impossible for us to randomly. However, when I go to a school, sometimes I'll just walk in,
just pop in.
The other thing too is that like it is evaluatory, like we're a part of the process, but I'm there to completely just help them. That is all that is. I'm not there to stomp on their parade. I can tell you in my 27 years of doing this, of it 21 of them doing evaluations. I have not seen too many teachers that have been like, I would just ship out, like, you need to go change careers. It's pretty rare. It's very, very rare. So think about the thousands of teachers I've probably seen teach, or at least hundreds. It's very rare that I would see that. Nobody's getting out of bed and saying, I'm going to wreck a kid's day today. No one does. Not a single teacher.
So I guess that is very fair in terms of, I've even said, I hope 3 years from now, I am completely different. Like, I hope that, I hope that I think like, I can't believe I used to do that.
Yes, you'll retain what works for you, and then you'll evolve to be better for the kids that you have in front of you, because the kids are changing every year too. So no, I think that's that evolution piece. And I think you have to remember that too when you're evaluating a new teacher, is that you're not evaluating it to the standard I expect from a 15-year teacher. I'm evaluating it to a standard of a first-year teacher, where they want to go. And
so do you think there should be, and I don't want to bring you into any like bad territory here, but do you think there should be ever like continuous evaluations?
I would have always wanted it.
Pardon?
I would have always wanted it as a teacher. I always welcomed it as an administrator too.
Because because that's another.
I don't think it's that's a union thing to get, like, that would be
okay. I didn't know that.
That'd be a contract thing that we'd have to talk. I think they would have some issues with that. But done in a positive way. Like, remember, a teacher can ask for an evaluation any year they want. That's allowed. Like, perhaps you're moving in a year and you need a more recent evaluation on file. So the teacher can ask for that at any time. So that is something they can ask for any time. And then you just use the same process as you would with a first year teacher. So, and it is the administrator's duty, as per the School Education Act, to make sure that you're supervising your staff. So supervision and evaluation are two totally different things, as you know. But supervision is the wander arounds, right? The pop ins and stuff like that. But it is our duty as an administrator to do that, to know what's going on in your school at all times. Because in the end, the person sitting in the big chair is responsible for every single thing that happens in every single room. And no matter what.
So, and I've had a few conversations about how much more liability you take on as a principal versus a vice principal.
One's named in the Education Act and one isn't.
Yeah. So how did you kind of decipher or determine what your vice principals would do? Like, is that a you decision when you're a principal? Like, do you have a conversation, or
I think
what does that look like?
Well, in good relationship, it's probably a two-way street. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some dog's breakfast type things that happen, and we used to always call it, that's the fine print at the bottom, and who's cleaning the barf and who's cleaning up the bathroom as well. That's the way it goes. But there's definitely some back and forth. I mean, vice principals are an important part of this whole machine that keeps this thing moving. Huge. So like they have duties as assigned, and like that's what you work through with them, and you hope that they're then learning too. Like that's the goal, is to have them learn and pick up skills so that when they go sit in the big chair, they're not gonna.
So how did you feel that you grew as a leader between like your first VP gig towards when you start as a principal? Like, what does it mean to grow as a leader? I know you.
I think lots. I think you pick up some of the stuff from the people you worked with, the leaders. Everyone, for good or bad, you pick up things from the leaders you've worked with. You see, I like this. I would not do that. I would do it this way. And I think that's what I was collecting. I was adding to my toolbox as I went through that, and I just wanted to make sure, like, when I was at Westwood as a vice principal, I was with Gary Cannell. He was excellent at. The two things I really took, he was excellent at lots of things, but two things I really took from was budgeting. He knew his budget inside and out.
How much of a pain is that?
It can be a pain, yeah, for sure. But if you keep it up, if it's a part of your daily or at least weekly thing, it's not so bad, but it can drag you down, especially if you're not a math person. That is a problem, right? So that was one. And then he also did not give up on his thing was, I'm going to kick you across the stage, not out of school. That was his big thing. And so I think that stuck with me as well. So some of the really hard cases I didn't want to give up on. And I learned later as a principal here that's part of the circle of security training that we our division offers, and how much that was rooted in it. That I've had so many kids burn bridges with me just repeatedly, and how I made sure to always be there again for them. And sometimes that's the first time they ever saw that in life.
Well, yeah,
right. They never had an adult buy into them, so they're going to keep burning it. And so
because that's all they've known is to not trust,
bail, and I refuse to do that with kids. I refuse to. I mean, in my, like I said, 27 years, I may have had 3 kids I think have been probably should have been in jail, and they all did end up in jail. Well, because we're a microcosm of society in schools. So that 0.001% is there. So it's a pretty small number though. In 27 years. So anyway, so that was, I think that was, so from him I got that, and then the family from Paula, and really pushing my staff to take time for them. And then with Jen Rushdie, she was celebrate everyone. Everyone's doing something good every day. Find it. think she was a big proponent of that, and it was really important for me to hear too. She wasn't always about the gold stars and plaques on the walls for the best of the best, but she was something good. There's something good in everyone. So let's find that and capitalize on that. She was great at that. And then being here, I just, from my own beliefs and found out through martial arts and through my time as a teacher and a VP, you just kind of make who you think you are. And I knew coming into this building what I wanted to make is the home away from home feel, and that was my goal.
Yeah, and so just shifting gears a little bit here. I'm just wondering, anyone who becomes vice principal, principal, kind of that ladder, kind of as you're moving up, how have you kind of balanced the family work dynamic?
That's not easy. That's for sure. That's not an easy one.
The immediate smirk, but again, but this is kind of my question, because
it's tough.
Obviously, I'm always thinking, like, what is the future going to be like? What am I going to do? What do I want to pursue?
Sure.
And every single person I talk to who's been an admin or higher up, they're like, I don't know. That's the comments. So like, what we're like.
Well, and also both my kids were under the age of 6 when I did my master's as well. So I was doing my master's as well as being a VP at Westwood, and 2 kids under the age of 6. You know how I did number 1? My wife was amazing. I took care of those kids tons. She stayed home. We had my privilege allowed me to have that chance to have our family make that choice. My kids went to my school. That certainly helped, because they're big sports kids. And so while I was seeing the school play, I also got to see my kids play. So both kids spent my daughter was here for 3 years, 7, 8, 9, and then she had to go to high school because there was no high school here. And then Gavin spent 6 years here. So he spent his whole 6 years here. So he was with me for better or worse, they both would say. And so that helped. That helped a lot, because, especially for Gavin, who was in high school sports, Callie did as well, but I didn't have to worry because it was at Westwood. I would go and watch. When he was here, I would just work till he was done his practices at 5:15, 5:30, and we would go home. Or if it was a force, because he was in peak as well in hockey. So, and so was she. So their days were long, but I was the one dropping them off. And then I was already, it was my building. I was already here. Our building was here. So it became their home. And I'm going to be honest with you, they grew up in this building. Like they were a part of helping build desks for this school. They were part of putting lockers on. They physically built parts of the school before any kids set foot in it. To this day, some of the PhysEd equipment has stuff that they wrote on. They wrote EMT on. So they're as big a part of the school as anyone. So it became a part of our lives. And like in the winters when it was cold, we'd come here and play badminton. And it's just part of growing up as a kid of a teacher, right? So they had that benefit. So was it, looking back now that my kids are 22 and 20, I would do things differently. I would have spent more time with them and less time here. 100%.
So, but I guess that's my question. Like, what could you have done differently? Like, what are some?
I don't regret anything. I don't look back. That's just not the way I am. But like, what could I have done differently?
Going toward that, like, what do you trim? Like, because I guess that's the thing where
I actually don't have that answer, because I'm also a believer. If you really want the best results, you got to put the time in. And as an administrator, you don't get that. You don't. You have a late, and like I know that will be shirked on by many people. You just. I think you have to just make sure that the time you're putting in is quality. Don't be wasting time. If you're wasting time, then just get out. Like go spend time with your family. There's nothing wrong with wasting time with your kids ever. Like that is fun. I mean, I just had a great weekend with my kids here for Thanksgiving, and it was amazing. And I had a great time having them home from university and college. And I was wasted. I could care less if we were just doing nothing.
But
right? It is a balancing act, and it is tough, and especially when you want your building to be like. So this was the first school we'd opened in that many years. You don't think I felt that? I felt that. But I also was just all in. Like I was all in. I wouldn't have gone into that without my partnership at home, knowing that was what it was. And that helps as well.
So you kind of need to have that conversation of this is obviously, you
better have had that.
But I like that you said about you pretty much find your way to make the schedules line up, because I remember I asked a few of the people that do like a lot of coaching here. And I said, well, how do you do all this coaching having like younger kids? And they told me, it was a high school football coach, I think, in the US or something. They've been coaching for 30 years. And they said, someone asked them that same question. They said, well, you know what? If you are passionate about it, you're going to do it anyway. So he's like, take your kids to the field. Like, bring them with, like they can throw a ball around. Like they're there, they see you, and you kind of make it, again, it's almost, you're embedding both together so that it's one's not work, one's not just family. Like there is a kind of way to navigate it.
I would love to have someone sit down with my kids and find out their take on it, but they don't think they would ever say I wasn't around. Like if they had an event, I was at it. Wouldn't matter if it was like an award ceremony or Like I made sure that between my wife and I, we were at everything that they did. Didn't matter what. Now, oftentimes, especially as they got older into high level ring and high level hockey, you had to divide and conquer. It just was impossible. We were in two different cities at that point, right? So, but it's a tough road to walk, and it's a tough line, and you do have to draw a hard line on some things. Like, and I really applaud administrators now who say, no, now it's family time. Don't. And I think that's smart. I think that's a good thing to do. Having said that, there's a part of our job that is just, we have to be at meetings, and we have to be, I think you do need to be seen at some sports and some drama. And if it's important to a kid and they see their principal at it, I don't care what it is. If it's hand games, if it's you need to be there.
Well, being present
all the time. Yeah. My nightmare was to be the principals I had. I didn't know them. I didn't know them from a hole in the wall. Unless they were suspending me, I didn't know them in high school. That was the only reason I would have known them. Yeah. And I never wanted that. I never wanted to walk down these hallways and kids be like, "Who's that? Who's that guy?" And especially no way I could put up with that.
Especially when it comes to if you have your first gig at such a big school, because once you get into that 1,500 plus, you're in an airport every day. Yeah. That was kind of the expression.
Who's around 1,500 people in a day?
Pardon?
Who? Who has a job that they just wander through 1,500 people a day? No one. We do. We have that job. Yeah, and I left here when it was 1150, so it's 400 more than when I left. Just had to get me out of the building.
Yeah, it has not been.
Yeah, so it's a unique situation, and you can't be everything to all those kids. Yeah, but every single one of those kids will at their dinner table say, "Hey, my vice principal popped into my Dungeons and Dragons group meeting today," or I'd go running with the track team, or I'd show up on the Saturday morning at 9:00 when the track was on, or when the cross country running was on. 10 minutes I'd be there because I had karate after it. Because I've always taught karate during this whole time as well. Yeah. So you just to me it's a huge part of it, and I know administrators work crazy hard beyond that, and so it shouldn't feel like you need to be at those things. Yeah. But in my mind, kids need to see you at those things, and families. But I could be on my own there. You never
know. So why Star Wars?
Why Star Wars? That's you know what? Star Wars was my escape when I was younger. Okay. So I grew up with Star Wars, right? I mean, you think about when it came out, I was very young, like 6 years old. Mm-hmm. So it was Empire Strikes Back was the first Star Wars.
So I would have been pretty much same age for the newer ones.
New ones, yeah. So Empire would have been the first movie I ever saw in a theater. Yeah. I just really connected with it, and at times when my younger days, when I had, I had a great family, but every family has some times, and so it was my escape, and I felt such akin to the story, which is a classic old story, the good versus bad, and the father, and it's all such classic religion. He wasn't writing anything new.
No.
My big line is that one day George Lucas will be looked at as Shakespeare, though, because he just copied him. His dialogue's not the best,
but you know what? A George Lucas Shakespeare comparison could be fun.
Very fun, and in fact, they've written Star Wars in Shakespeare language. But anyway, so I just loved it, and it just became a thing for me that I connected with, and it was a way to connect with kids. But it was just because that's who I was. I didn't do it to connect with kids. I just loved the stories and the movies, and that just continued. And it, I feel like it's such an amazing world that was created by one person's brain, and it really shows you the ability that we have as humans to just create and everything about that. I just loved everything about that, and it just gave me a chance to just disappear when I needed to, whether or not it was a book or a movie and I've probably seen the original Star Wars movie, and I'm not making this up. It's got to be over 500 times. I'm not even making it. Like my wife laughs. I just quote the whole thing, the whole time. I just love it. To this day, I'll still watch it if it's on. And I'll flip it on when it's not.
Well, that was one of the things that I've seen about teachers who don't get burnt out as easily is there's usually some sort of identity affirmation that they have that's outside of teaching, right? It can obviously be very overwhelming.
Definitely.
If every piece of, I wouldn't say validation, but things that you see of value in yourself are connected to your job, that can be exhausting. Yeah. So Star Wars kind of your identity, I think kind of consistency.
I think that and karate were the two things. Okay. Because karate has always allowed me to be a teacher. So since I was 15, I've been teaching karate. Mm-hmm. And so even when I moved into administration, I stayed a teacher always because I got to teach twice a week of karate till this day. So, I mean, that's a big part of who I am and who I am. And my belief system came from that as well. I found my own spirituality through karate and meditation and stuff like that. Yeah. So it became who I was. And I think
do you meditate outside of karate?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it became my way of making sure I stayed a bit more centered and to be that empathetic listener and living in the moment and knowing that this is the only moment I have right now. I can't have another one. And that definitely rooted me in all of that. And so, you know, I was present when I needed to be present for whatever reason. And listen, talk to my wife. Can I be distracted? Yeah, I can be.
Like, when do you feel off center?
I feel off centered around people that are selfish. Like really selfish. Like they don't look at the.
I like that you instantly went to people.
Yeah, like people who are selfish really throw me off because I don't understand it. It's so foreign to me. I don't understand that mentality, and it is unfortunately becoming more and more prevalent in our society, and it really throws me off for till I can try to put it in a, you know, seeking to understand kind of view. I want to know why what's their story. What's their story that's got them to be that way? They definitely have some sort of trauma that's made them. So I need to be more empathetic towards that. But in the moment, when, especially as an administrator, when you see somebody just being so out of left field with an issue, and whether or not it's what a teacher has done or, you know, just assuming the worst.
Do you have an example you can share on that? Or no?
I think I'm going to stick out of examples because
that's fine.
Just generically
Absolutely,
thinking about that. Like there's been times. Just here's a good example because I don't think this will give too much away. There was one time I was dealing with a situation with a young lady in my office, and she was in some trouble, and she was going to have a consequence, and she understood that. And my first question to every kid in my office, no matter what reason it was always, how can I help you? And many times they'd be like, I'm in trouble. That's why I'm here. I'm like, okay, but how can I help you? Like, clearly this isn't, I mean, it threw kids off a lot.
Yep.
He's like, you caught me with marijuana. Why do you think I'm here? But anyway, one time this girl, and so I'd phoned her family to come pick her up, and her dad came, and she was just sitting in my office on the couch and looking at her phone, and he came in and just grabbed her phone and just whipped it against the wall and just started cursing her out. And I just immediately flipped to being that girl's dad. Even though that was her dad, I just was like, you do not speak to kids that way in my office. Like, that's not what our school's about. This is a safe space. If you got to do that, you got to leave this building. And so he immediately apologized. I will give him that. But I mean, there's those moments where like, that set me off right. Like this isn't right. Like I can't continue on anything I'm doing right now until I deal with this. Another example is during an interview actually just recently with an EA. For an EA position, I was interviewing a lady, and she was saying that she wanted to, you know, when the common question, like, why do you want to be an educational assistant? She says she can't have children of her own, and so she doesn't feel like she's worth it. And so this is her way of hopefully having some worth. And I stopped the interview, and I looked right at her, and I said, please know that you not having a child has nothing to do with your worth. And like, it just stopped the interview. And I was interviewing with another person. I just like stopped it dead. There's nothing else mattered in that moment except for that to me, to say to her, that's not, whatever you're working through, I need you to hear from somebody else that you are full and you're important, and perhaps this is the way you're going to give back to kids. Those are the moments. Like, that's when you really reveal what's important to you. It's like when you are put to the fire, what's your reaction going to be? And I've seen it a million times with teachers doing it such great ways. I mean, I've had the luxury of working with some amazing teachers who are still in this building, who are around our division, who are now vice principals and principals. I've seen them lay their souls on the line for what they believed in, and it's so powerful to see. And you see why you're in education when you see those moments.
Hey everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Just wanted to say again, if there are any issues with professional conduct or you would like to share your own story, experience, or have something you would like to contribute to the show, please do not hesitate to reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or send a direct message on Instagram to @MrClarkAfterDark. Hope you all enjoyed, potentially found something of use, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. See you guys all next time. Unless you're scared.